A very good evening and welcome to the Fourth Estate on NTV. Charles Mwangu Shampagi, and tonight we'll be discussing the crisis in neighboring Burundi. Was there a coup? Was there no coup? What does it mean for President Pierre Nkurunziza after regaining control of the situation? There was an attempt to overthrow Pierre Nkurunziza when he went to Arusha, Tanzania, where regional leaders met to discuss the crisis in Burundi, which has been going haywire over the last about 2 or 3 weeks, because Pierre Nkurunziza insists he is qualified to run for a third term of presidency, and those opposed to him say he should have retired after serving for 10 years, which they calculate at 2 5-year terms. To discuss that, let me start with my colleague Chris Obore. Chris, thank you very much for stepping in last Sunday.
It was a difficult shoes to put on. I just tried, but the lenses were not tying well.
No, you did very well.
You stepped in Burundi?
Eh? No. Stepping in on the show.
Oh. You know, given what has been said all over, we can't be certain who is not and who is involved in Burundi.
Maybe we'll know over the next course of the discussion. Edgar Tabaro is a lawyer and, in very many respects, a regional expert on political and other issues.
Oh, I'm now an expert. No, I do follow 1 or 2 issues in the region, but telling me an expert is really, those are really big shoes to fit in. Yeah. But anyways, I'm a lawyer.
Very nice to have you. And Dismas Nkunda. Dismas,
yes.
Dismas is a human rights lawyer, activist, is a journalist, in so many things. Very nice to have you.
Thank you.
At one time you had a lot of interest in refugee situations in the region.
Yes.
You still do?
I do, but not my day-to-day work.
And the crisis in Burundi has sent floods of refugees across the borders.
About 100,000.
105,000. 105,000.
Yeah.
That's an incredible number for a country that only 10 years ago emerged out of a major crisis.
Not even emerged, but the country which had returned all its refugees back home, now it's sending them. It's like a factory.
Conveyor belt. Conveyor belt.
I think you need to say
moving in reverse.
Is a pioneer monitor journalist. That should be very fitting. When you say just a journalist,
he's pioneer monitor journalist, pioneer observer journalist, pioneer.
I think Chris is right, because probably was the first reporter to be recruited by the Monitor newspaper in 1992. So that I can take as an accolade, no?
Let me actually start with you. With your many years in journalism, following regional crises, especially those that produce refugees, what do you make of the crisis in Burundi from where it started, even before you go to the coup that was attempted and failed?
It's a crisis that everybody saw it was in the making. I think there was simply lack of recognition that actually Burundi was going that way. Way back, I think about 2 years ago, we did warn, as human rights organizations warned that Burundi was headed towards the same crisis that we are witnessing today.
What was the basis? There wasn't a demand at that time for Pierre Nkurunziza to run again.
Well, it was. We were predicting there was going to be a constitutional crisis because of the interpretation of the Arusha Accords, and in particular, the calls within the CNDD.
FDD.
It's a very wrong abbreviation of the political
CNDD,
party. FDD, whatever. Yeah, and that the machinations were starting to happen in Burundi, internally within the party, that they should be able to strategically let Nkurunziza stand. I think there was even a regional pronouncement by the East African heads of states that Nkurunziza, there was misinterpretation, not understanding clearly how to redefine the Arusha Accords in order to make him...
To link it with the Constitution. With the Constitution. That was made 5 years after the Arusha Accords.
So that constitutional crisis certainly was a trigger for someone to start thinking, look around. If this place is not carefully handled, then this will happen and happen.
If you look at Pierre Nkurunziza's 10 years in power, what is the basis of his claim for a third term in office?
There are two things. The Constitution of Burundi allows 2 terms. Right? 2-term limits, that's it. However, the Arusha Accord...
But that hasn't been tested yet.
It hasn't been tested. Now, what is contesting is that the Arusha Accords, when the Arusha Accords came in place and there was a government allowed of, different rebel groups, political parties allowed him to become the president, that he was elected by the parliament. It was not the universal suffrage.
suffrage.
So that one,
it was not the people of Burundi.
it's not the people of Burundi, it's the parliament. So that's the contestation he's having. He's saying if I had gone to the people to vote for me, I would have counted that as a term. But his opponents are telling him, even when you are serving, because you are elected by the parliament, you are still serving
the people of Burundi.
the people of Burundi,
As
you
a
are also
president,
as a president. So those are 3 presidential terms. Now his party contests that. They say, no, he served only 1 term. No, he served only 1 term because the first term was an interim government. Now this one is his first term. Let him do the 3rd term. So that's the contestation. Now that matter went before the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court ruled in favor of him.
The deputy. I'm mixing
Deputy
up.
president.
No,
The
not
vice president.
not the vice president. The chief justice.
Yes, the one
vice
who
president of the
Yes,
Constitutional
vice
Court.
president of the Constitutional Court.
Yes.
Had to flee the country.
Yes,
because
he fled the country. His claim was that that he was pressured, that the judiciary was pressured into signing and agreeing to the fact that Nkurunziza had another term to take. Whether that pressure that was put on the justices was really, we can't be able to verify it, because this is only one individual who's speaking about.
And of course, his senior said
Yes.
it took a different position.
Yes.
Edgar, let me turn to you.
Okay.
If you have a country as fragile, and I'm afraid to use the word, as miserable as Burundi has been over the last so many years, with such a sharp ethnic divide, 84% Hutu, 14% Tutsi, 1% Twa or others, which has gone through so many years since independence.
They actually have Bahima in Burundi as
Yes.
well, by the way.
Which has gone through so much crisis, so much suffering over the last so many years. Should the debate in 2015 be about the legitimacy or the right of the incumbent to seek another term, or how that country moves on after the Arusha Accords, after the Constitution?
You know, to situate the problem, if we are to problematize the so-called crisis in Burundi, we ought to look at the background to all this. And you know, we are throwing words, rather phrases like Arusha Accord and what have you. They have a basis as to why they reached such positions. And the tragedy of this whole situation, as a practicing lawyer and one who has taught at law school for a while, I taught for 11 years at law school, where I rose to senior lecturer. And you must have seen it now in your law school as you're studying your law degree. There tends to be a disjuncture between what the aspirations of a people, or what the people intend to cure, and what eventually emerges in legal texts. There is a very complex subject in the discipline of law called legislative drafting. Now, a legislative draftsperson is expected to reduce the intentions, the intentions of the people, the legislature, into legal texts, and many times they did not arrive at that very conclusion that was envisaged in the beginning. So now that's why we have that disjuncture between what the Arusha Accord intended and what the constitutional text came up in the finality. And more so, to add on to that, CNDD, FDD was not a signatory to the Arusha Accord. Remember, they were brought on much later. Well, forced, but there were many regional powers involved. There was Mandela, there was then Zuma, then before Nyerere passed on. Okay, you can
our own President Museveni playing one role or the other.
President Museveni is actually the one who saw Nkurunziza and identified him, and I think pointed out that this one would make a good president, because Nkurunziza, brother, has a very interesting background. His dad was killed in the 1972 genocide, by the way.
Yes.
He was a governor. Nkurunziza himself is a survivor of genocide. He crossed through a swamp, crocodile-infested swamp to go into the Congo. He's an accidental politician. He's an accidental guerrilla. He was for all intents and purposes, enjoying his physical education classes at the National University of Burundi.
And playing football.
Playing football. He was the coach for the...
No, I'm told he still does. Even recently, he goes out and plays football.
He plays football.
Even now.
He's a physical fitness freak. So, so as it were, Nkurunziza takes over the mantle of the presidency. And he comes with this very reconciliatory approach to issues in Burundi. You know, even the killers of Marikei Ndadaye live in Burundi. Kano Bosokoza lives in Burundi. He's never been tried. No? He said that let's put an end to this, let's start a new chapter. So as it were, in the run-up to the Arusha Accord, Mandela and certain European governments, in particular Belgium and France, had promised heaven and earth, you know, lots of money, you remember?
Yes.
Big time monies to reconstruct Burundi. That was not forthcoming. So Mr. Nkurunziza had to embark on reconstruction of the state. And mind you, this is a state that collapsed immediately after independence with the assassination of Prince Louis Rwagasore. Louis Rwagasore is very much comparable to Patrice Lumumba. I don't know why it doesn't attract as much attention. He was of UPRONA, Union for National Progress, and he, First Party, and he was a social.
No, my question is the question I put to you. The history is important, but the question is: should a country as fragile as Burundi be debating how it changes leaders and whether that should be led purely from a legal text?
But I mean,
instead of placing the country into the real politique, the context in which.
And that's what I was coming to. Now I was laying that background to show you the real politique, because you talked about the ethnic composition. Of course, that's a very touching issue in Burundi. But surprisingly, on this occasion, it's not an issue in this configuration, within at least. UPRONA is a member of the coalition, of the coalition ruling Burundi.
No, but it's going now. Now actually it's going to stand right.
Yeah, they have a candidate, but he's very weak.
and you can't rule out the fact that for countries as fragile as that, it will gravitate back to the ethnic.
And this is where I want to arrest your enthusiasm. And I've seen many people styled as experts on Burundi who can't even, I was telling Dismas before this show, who can't even point where Prince Louis Rwagasore Avenue is. I mean, such a landmark in Bujumbura, you just can't miss it. And such persons are the ones
who are discussing
Burundi, and I see they are being contacted by AFP and Sujui what. Now, this is what I want to tell you that is on the ground. Burundi, over 90%, there are 10 million, over 90% rely on subsistence agriculture. Only about 10% live in urban areas. Now, it has 129 communes. The disturbances...
What is the equivalent of a commune? Because
would I call it a county?
Okay.
You know, here we have balkanized our administrative system. I don't know how to compare it with Burundi, but there are 129. And the disturbances are in only 4 communes. Now, Burundi has, because of many years of instability and near economic shutdown, when they started reforming and reconstructing the state, the first real monies came in about maybe 2010, when they signed an MOU with the IMF. I remember when I looked at the text of that MOU with the Minister of Finance, it was loop-sided. I mean, they were practically handing over everything to the Bretton Woods to run, even approving payments for this and that, approving payments for importation of maize, of food rations for this had to be approved in Washington. So I'm coming to the very issue. Now, the economic situation that arises there, we have high youth unemployment, and that youth unemployment that is basically urban-based. If you look at the so-called, what they call the subaltern masses, they're the ones who are leading they're the ones involved in the so-called demonstration of protest.
Not in Bonerakure.
Bonerakure is like comparable to Kalangala Action Plan. What was the Nyakundire, Fedu of, you know, there's something similar. Arrow Boys was I wouldn't want to, those ones were real arms, but more importantly,
I actually wouldn't compare Nyakundire with Kalangala Action Plan, because the other one was paramilitary Nyekundiras are not paramilitary, actually.
What were they? They were real military?
No. Nyekundiras are groups that mobilize money, resources, and...
But you remember there was a general, is he retired or in same retirement, who was reading to Nyakundire? and when he was about to hit
I need to bring Chris into the discussion before we go far. Chris, would you characterize President Pierre Nkurunziza's recent victory over the alleged coup plotters as a victory, or is that the kind of victory that he needs to regain legitimacy as a leader of Burundi?
You know, I'm not an expert on Burundi. That's why I actually asked you to bring the expert.
And he has actually vindicated me that he's an
expert.
An
expert.
I've never been an expert.
When you called me, I told you Edgar will understand Burundi, the internal dynamics. By virtue of your work. I'm not saying by virtue of your work, you haven't seen the deals, the counter deals, and what.
And I'll come to the deals later.
But I am looking at this purely. One has a student of public policy and also a social scientist. And I look at the problem Burundi as an African problem. We'll make a mistake to discuss it as a Burundi affair. It's an African problem, which I will explain from my point of view. And it is a crisis that's going to change the dynamics. First of all, immediately in the Great Lakes region. And the dynamics, they will change it for the worse. Why I say that is, you know, we are having emergence of leaders, cliques, clubs. The region is run by a club of leaders. And I was interested not in the chaos in Burundi, but the statements of other leaders. Especially the statements of Paul Kagame and our own veteran.
All the silence of our veteran.
Our veteran's reaction. Very quiet, no statement.
But the statement itself, the silence.
And I was watching how will he come back to Uganda. Indeed, he landed in Uganda. But unusual that his plane can remain open after he has disembarked. Even the door was open at Entebbe. So I suspected he brought in Nkurunziza. I suspected.
There was a lot of rumor about that.
Yes.
There was talk that
I don't know whether he brought him or not, but
there was a booking for Muziga for
but when he comes in, he disembarks and the plane remains, the door remains open. Could be something else. I'm just suspicious.
What is supposed to happen if they...
Normally, once that has come, my friend, the thing is closed. The boss has disembarked.
Maybe they were fumigating. after mosquitoes in the
there could have been a trick to let the others disappear and then you...
No, but that rumor was there, certainly.
Then Kagame, the way he was speaking, it made me suspect that he knew a thing about that, what was happening in Burundi. And he was partly, maybe even the orchestra. But it was my suspicion. So the club of leaders we are having, I refer to them, a student of literature. When they're studying literature, they're teaching us about the neglected writers. You know, West Africa dominated the literary world in Africa, up to today. These fellows went to study in France, they educated, they came back, they came with that thinking, let's make everything African. Very beautiful ideas, very beautiful. They resented how the French were trying to assimilate them to make them Frenchmen. And they wanted Africanness in everything. The Leopold Senghor, their poems, their what, they could revive our African. But at the same time, those very fellows were busy chastising the Western civilization while marrying French women. You should hear it. Saying everything, but they were marrying French women. And they were speaking everything bad about France, the French system and everything. It has continued with our body politics. Well, people, basically, they want to create a club mainly to dominate their people. Dominate them and create classes where they, the leaders, have both, they are the ruling class and they are the business class. That is the source of conflict in Africa. We haven't got people who espouse ideals that empower the ordinary African, the ordinary citizen. Edgar will tell you the kind of poverty in Burundi, the second poorest country in the world. But you wonder what the interests of leaders would be. So when people themselves rise to against Nkurunziza, I saw a positive in that. that whether there were few, it didn't matter. That this was the people, the women were in the streets. People were trying to have power over their leaders. Now, the thing got aborted when a certain Niombare from nowhere comes and declares, hijacks this and begins this, and now they are taken off.
That raises another question, Chris, that we'll be discussing.
Yes,
let me just mention it so that we discuss it. There is thinking from your experts and analysts of Burundi, or people watching, and they're wondering, was Niombare actually a coup leader? Did Nkurunziza exit Bujumbura knowing that what happened after him would actually happen? And his response, he returns with dozens of people supporting him, accompanying him back into the city, and you're wondering what happened to that group of barefoot, on a forum that we contribute to, I describe them as barefoot protesters. When did they get taken over by the military? And
all that you can speculate, but the point I was building, I saw the rise of those few individuals as the actual renaissance of Africa in terms of politics. That the poor, the barefoot people, the rich, the unwashed, as Nagana prefers to call ours in Uganda, the unwashed
of the slum,
were saying, Mr. President, we don't want you.
But these are urban dwellers. But in the situation of Burundi, you can't really call them poor. They are the
whatever they are, but
the lower end of the middle class.
let me make this
but
point.
it's a very poor country, the second poorest country. Well, barefoot is what they
probably to the levels of poverty.
Levels of poverty.
Let me complete this point. So, when I saw those people coming, I said, yes, this is what Africa wants. That the people will begin to actually demand that they have the power over those who lead them.
Call them to account.
Call them to account. Now, when you see a certain general comes, I think out of opportunistic interests, he thought perhaps this is an opportunity for him to become relevant.
Opportunity from where?
Whatever, whether it is him or those who are using him.
All external.
Or external. So to try to now undermine the effort of these people. So the citizens of Burundi have lost in what would have become a turning point in their governance.
Thank you.
That they begin to ask a question. If the military wanted to intervene in Burundi, it should have been to protect these people as they push.
That's how.
But that's what it was doing.
What happens with Niombare is different.
Okay.
He comes now and hijacks the people's movement and destroys it.
Gentlemen, can we pick this discussion up after a short commercial break? We'll be right back.
Thank you.
You're still watching The Fourth Estate, and we're discussing the crisis in Burundi. And as Chris Obore puts it, it is a discussion of what is Africa's problem. Not.
It was defined in the book. Why should we reinvent the wheel? Africa's problem was defined in the book.
I have asked questions about that definition in that book, and I can tell you the answer I've gotten is a very long one.
It has been edited over the years, maybe.
You'll be lucky to find enough copies if you're looking for them. But I want to come back to you, Dismas, on the crisis in Burundi, because looking at it, second poorest country in the world.
Only after Malawi.
Only after Malawi.
Which Malawi is poorer than Nepal, eh?
Yes, poorer than Nepal, poorer than
Somalia. According to the World Bank, Malawi is the poorest, the second is Burundi.
The reason why we should question these Bretton Woods statistics.
What is the fight about the second poorest country in the world? And I'd like you to also look at the reaction of the regional leaders, because you have the coalition of the willing that has been pushing the East African community.
Yes.
President Uhuru Kenyatta has been off this Burundi discussion. President Museveni, as Edgar said, identified Pierre Nkurunziza as a man who could be a good president. And well, knowing President Museveni's history and third terms and constitutional changes, maybe the discussion in Burundi is not so far-fetched.
Well,
Hold
it a moment.
You know the fight for supremacy in the region between President Pierre Nkurunziza and President Jakaya Kikwete in Tanzania.
Yes.
And Kikwete now was hosting and comes out with that strong statement about condemnation of a coup. Then you see the statement from President Paul Kagame. Paul Kagame himself, there is a debate about whether he'll go for a third term or not, whether he'll change his constitution, but he says if people don't want you, feel you haven't served them, then you don't insist that you want to be their leader. What do you make of this? And the silence in Kampala?
Yes, the silence in Kampala is very loud.
Deafening.
Deafening because for obvious reasons. I think Nkurunziza would not have been without Kampala, period. There was a disturbance that happened at one time when the negotiations were going on for him to become the president, and I think Rwasa, Agathon Rwasa had become a problem.
FNL.
Literally, they went and told him, you either join or
you're out.
We are finishing. You are dealing
He
with
refused that till very
but
late.
the thing is that certainly Museveni has been, if you understand the peace process of Burundi, he was at the heart of the matter.
Central.
Very central at the heart of the matter. He had so many envoys. Adonia Yebare, the journalist himself, was the person actually who was working on behalf of the president, closely monitoring how the situation was evolving, very close to Nkurunziza.
That's right.
So
they struck a friendship.
Yes. So to ask Museveni to look at an individual who he has brought up, and I would think for him, talking about third term really is not.
I'm actually told there is something beyond that. There is also some other connections beyond politics and governance issues related to family.
That one I'll have yet to fight. I haven't.
No, I've been told about it. Yes.
Maybe that one is also there. So, but the most interesting and probably development in the region was Paul Kagame. His statement. He said, if people don't want you, you have no moral authority of remaining. If people don't want you to govern them, just leave. What are you doing here? And I guess it resonates. Sometime back in 2006, a group of us with the late Tajuddin Abdurrahim, we did interview him on SABC, Kagame in Banjul, the Gambia, on the sidelines of the AU Summit. And I did ask him directly, Mr. Kagame, will you change the constitution of Rwanda to stand for a third term? He went, I mean, I've never seen him be emotional. He is emotional. But at that particular
I was wondering why he would.
He just said, who has the capacity? Who decides on who changes the third term? Who
changes the constitution for a third term?
Yes, for third term. Have you consulted the people of the country? I will not be party to anyone who is going to change the Rwanda constitution to put in a third term. I will not be party to that. So when he says, I think this week, was it this week?
Yes.
When he says that Nkurunziza, if your people don't want you,
go home.
Go home.
It was actually last week in Switzerland.
Yes, at that summit.
But he also tweeted. He also tweeted this week.
It certainly puts a spanner in works. It does mean that probably he's running out now. A person like
is that a word you think will echo? Is that a statement that will echo every time we discuss a possibility of a third term and a change of a constitution in Rwanda? What he has said about Burundi?
Certainly, someone is going to hold him accountable to the words that he's using. If, for example, now what is very clever, he's being very clever. He's using the words that if your people don't want you, you have nothing to do in that country.
Yes, when they you haven't delivered to them.
Exactly, you haven't done anything to them. And he was actually, that statement, he gave it on the rubric of saying that, what has he delivered to Burundi? So for him, it's easy to say that I have something to show that I've delivered for my people.
But Louis Mushikiwabo made certain statements in reference to the possibility of them intervening in Burundi over a possibility over what I don't know what words to, I can't remember words exactly, but they said there was a possibility of a genocide that Burundi had linked up with the FDLR and the mate.
And then Kagame makes makes also very interesting comments about the refugees pouring over the border and says don't address how well the refugees are handled.
Yes.
Address
the cause.
The cause, where they're coming from.
The coming refugees. But of course that's not, the refugees can be a scapegoat because refugees for them, they're human beings simply who want to be safe very quickly. But certainly I think what Kagame was referring to is that the question of governance in Burundi, the question of economics, because what has he delivered to the people of Burundi? And
that's the thing I want to...
If you could just conclude with The reaction from Nairobi and the reaction from Tanzania.
Yes.
Yes.
Tanzania, you see, first of all, Jakaya Kikwete is the chairman of the East African community. So politically has to be able to make a statement. And they can't make a statement which is pro-coup, even if they think that they wanted the coup back in their hearts. But he had to make a statement which shows that the East African leaders, as mandated by the African Union, are intervening in Burundi as the first place to go to. The second thing is that Nkurunziza has been in the configuration of the East African region. There's the coalition of the willing, that's Kenyatta,
which is Kigali, Kampala, and Nairobi.
Then when Kikwete himself has had his own links with Nkurunziza, with the Bujumbura, in which they have had their own discussions away from the three leaders. So to that extent, he was in a catch-22. One, his country was receiving the biggest number of refugees, crossing over Lake Tanganyika into Tanzania. Secondly, he had to act.
That was the same route of return.
Yes, and the same route of return. And the previous years, those are the years that we have been fighting, asking the government of Tanzania. Tanzania, I think, has naturalized quite a lot of thousands, hundreds of thousands of refugees, and naturalized them in their country. So for him to
but on the other hand, it's expelling persons of Rwandan
origin and Kenyan.
That one has its own. We can have a discussion.
We will have it besides
Edgar, the question is not. I mean, the major question still is, like Kagame said, if your people say go, why insist?
And that's what I want to address now. You know, I'm sorry, I'll be a little blunt on this. These urban dwellers, the masses of unemployed youth, are engaged in what I would call copycat activism. You know, I've already given you a background that IMF did give certain conditionalities that were supposed to be met for them to benefit from disbursement of funds and stuff like that. And as it were, it's now beyond really argument. It's a settled argument that the Bretton Woods policies do create winners and losers, and the winners are usually very few, a small class of elite and what have you. Then on the other hand, you have a large mass of alienated people. So these conditionalities that have been imposed in Burundi have not delivered the quick economic, or to use Museveni's terminology, bonabagagawale. Bonabagagawale.
Basoga can't pronounce it. They say
bonagawale. So this has not produced the bonabagagawale or the prosperity that, I mean, we all yearn for. Sasa, and on the other hand, and this is why I want to address the issue of ethnicity, Burundi is engaged in oil exploration. Those blocks were given to South Africans, I think to persons very close to Zuma. There's nickel, which has been discovered in trillions of US dollars.
Uranium?
What? Uranium? Nickel has been given to Chinese, uranium to the Russians. So there are international forces, and these are the external things I would like to address.
But the question is Pierre Nkurunziza looking at himself and saying, I can't go without my oil, as some people have said. I can't go without my uranium being explored. Now that we have discovered this, I think we have
that would be conjecture. That would be conjecture. But let me give you certain facts. So because of this axis from the BRICS that has won concessions there are certain international players that feel they have lost out. And if you look at the funding for the activism, the civil society, it is very consistent with those countries that have lost out.
Edgar, let me put the question again to you. Please. Why is Pierre Nkurunziza insisting on remaining president after serving for 10 years?
And this is what I want to... I'm coming to that. I'm building my case. You know, unfortunately, I can't speak so carelessly. I need to build my case to reach a certain point and see where we are coming from in the Republic of Burundi, unlike, say, what was discovered somewhere in the Albertan region. Now, as it were, in Burundi, these international forces have agents within Burundi. What the nowadays Rugumayas of this world would call the comprador, the comprador bourgeois. Now, the comprador bourgeois.
Chris knows about comprador
Yeah, political economy. We were discussing it earlier. I don't want to personalize the discussion here. The comprador bourgeois. So now these agents are drawn from the entire ethnic divide. You'll find Hutus in these deals. You'll find the Tutsis in these deals. And they are quite afraid that a drastic sudden change in leadership will compromise the newly acquired economic
and my question still will be, what causes a sudden drastic change if you sat in Arusha and arrived at the Arusha Accords with the whole of Africa participating, bless his soul, Nelson Mandela playing a central role, the Musevenis and others playing roles in delivering the peace that delivered the presidency to Pierre Nkurunziza. He serves 5 years, then Burundi has a constitution, he serves another 5 years, and in that constitution they say specifically, because one of the key things,
you see, that's where
some of the key things in the Burundi constitution are that there is a sharing of power, and positions split
60-40.
60-40.
60 Hutu, 40%.
In an ethnic population which is 1484.
Yes.
There is a clear desire by the people of Burundi to have smooth transition from one leader to another.
Yes.
Why does Nkurunziza insist that, I mean, what creates sudden change?
Exactly, and you see,
if you have such a negotiated settlement, and you have brought different armies together, different militias together to create a national army, and they haven't been fighting for the last almost 15 years.
The fighting is still going on. There are certain units that didn't surrender. There are those who are still operating in Congo.
I think he's meaning as a national army.
As a national army, they have been at least functioning. Yeah, some level. Until this recent...
Niombari, Godefroid. But Godefroid, first of all, was acting out of anger. He had been sacked from position of
but he was sacked because of a reason.
He authored the report.
Yes.
He authored the report. Well, I would like to go into some of these regional security issues.
But you're not answering my question.
No, he's talking about
I still wanting to dodge my question. So can you answer my question? Yes. What is Nkurunziza fighting for?
Nkurunziza has been asked by his party to contest for elections.
Chris.
Yeah.
And must it be Nkurunziza or no one else? Why can't his party front someone else? If they say, serve for 10 years, go. Kagame says, if your people tell you, you haven't delivered to us, go home.
But look at who is saying go home. When you use Kagame as an example, I know sometimes that name is treated as
sacred.
Sacred, it is a god of a certain thing, and certain people will unleash anger. But who's Kagame? Look at what he's doing in his own country. Look at the number of exilees, Rwandans who cannot enjoy their home, who also fought.
Don't look
so
at...
we can't, I'm saying, he loses the moral authority to say anything. That's why Museveni is smarter. He just keeps quiet and works underground.
And he says a lot by keeping quiet.
By keeping quiet. But you cannot, you can't expect Museveni to speak out.
But Chris,
again,
what he said, the essence of what he said, if you haven't served your people, go.
But I've just told you.
No, but there's that background of Mushikiwa's statement.
When I opened this show, I said, I refer to the Negritude writers, the Negritude movement in West Africa. The ideas they stood for, you read them.
Yes.
How they felt bad about assimilation policy of the French in the Francophone Africa. But their actions were variant. Yeah, they were busy just telling the African people, we must do everything African. They were busy kissing French women. So I'm saying, we don't take our leaders by their words. You don't pay attention to what leaders do say. Pay attention to what leaders do. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So that's not the person to.
Yes. So what is included as?
I understand where you're coming from, Charles. But I'm not even interested in these symptoms, because the happenings in Burundi are symptoms of an underlying problem. So I am interested in discussing the underlying problem, which I think, in my view, is our conceptualization of leadership is wrong. We are in a feudal arrangement. We are trying to borrow tenets from the Western world. Those who have understood the tenets are twisting them to benefit them. For example, we talk about institutions. When there's an institution, you should obey. But you see, an institution is an agreed way people want their affairs to be handled. That's why you have constitutions, you have this, you have all these. We did not have people's institutions in Africa. We have imposed institutions. And we are saying abide by those institutions. The people of Burundi were trying to initiate their institutions by coming out to say, you're a president, but shoot us, we will come. That is what will give birth to leaders who are responsive to people. As of now, the response leaders claim to give to people is through lip service. He has mentioned the critical part I was coming to, the economic interest in Burundi. I know for a fact there are regional leaders and their families and their one who are having interest in Burundi. Some people in Uganda who are aspiring to be even leaders have mining interests in Burundi. People have gone to open farms in Burundi. So they are not talking for the love of the ordinary Burundian.
And my question, Chris,
yes.
my question stands. You have those barefoot, you call them using the words of John Nagenda, the unwashed of the slum, on the streets of Bujumbura, telling Pierre Nkurunziza, we wanted you to lead us. You have led us, you led us for initial 5 years, elected by our representatives who are members of parliament and the regional players. You served another 5 years as a president elected by the people. We the people are saying, go home.
Very good. What you are bringing now, the issue of institutions, that's what you are asking. The people of Burundi were trying to defy their institutional arrangement. Because under the law, he's the lawyer. Nkurunziza beats them hands down.
Hands down.
Under the law. But it is, I come from the point of view that people should have the ultimate decision on how they are governed.
And
if their decision then
and that's why I've always disagreed with you, Mr. Obore. That is anarchism.
No, it's not anarchism.
That's anarchy.
No, not anarchism. But let me explain.
I'm actually wondering, what do you call anarchism?
You better have anarchy. A democratic anarchy than a constitutional dictatorship.
Chris, complete your point because we need to take a break.
So, if people think that the way the institution is now in Burundi is wrong, then they must change that law. Because the laws are not cast in stone, you know that. They are made and unmade. So the problem, but for you to say, the people have said, go, you go, Nkurunziza would be committing an illegality himself. Because he's leading a party, political party. And the party is saying, the other election was not a mandate of the people, was not adult suffrage. Let's subject this to adult suffrage.
Isn't that
now, those... Let's break these things into. There are many dimensions to this conflict. Yes. I am just giving you one dimension. If people believe that, like Kagame says, people don't want you, Nkurunziza is saying, let's go and prove that people don't want me.
At the poll.
So Nkurunziza shuts down Kagame.
And let me just put this question to you, gentlemen, just before I take the break. What does Nkurunziza want to deliver in the next 5 years that he has failed to deliver in the last 10?
That now.
And I'm going to give you the statistics.
Now,
if you could just give me a quick answer, and we run here because we need to take a break.
One, I am not examining the leadership of his party. Okay? Because you would understand, you are going to do governance issues now. What is the party philosophy of leading Burundi? No, then you see, even analyzing Nkurunziza as a person, as an institution. And does that party exist? Does it function as a party in Burundi? As of now, Nkurunziza is a party candidate. It's just like here, Ugandans say, Museveni has been here forever and ever. They are those voices. But there are people who are saying, he is our striker.
Or he's our best striker.
Now, then the people of Uganda, you say, okay, no, we are tired of Museveni. People from Arua come up. People from Bukeria come up. People from Kanungu come up. People come and say, Museveni must go. That would be a good deal. But when a certain introducer comes and says, now, I am overturning government, he has betrayed the people.
Yeah, because there are two dimensions. One is the protests, and then they are hijacked by Nyombare. Those are two different levels.
Exactly.
The question is, let me put the same question
but
to
Nyombare was trying to ride on the
in 30 seconds.
On the wave.
Yes, in 30 seconds. What is it that Nkurunziza wants to do if he gets a mandate of another 5 years that he has failed to do in the last, that he has not done in the last 10?
It's written in his manifesto. Address your mind to his manifesto.
After that is the simplest question to answer.
And you'll have the answers.
People then should be asking the same question during a campaign trail.
Yeah.
But
if you didn't bring water the other time, how will you bring
Nyombare has actually not denied the Burundians the opportunity to ask Nkurunziza the vital question.
Let me ask
in
a
fact,
question.
for coups, I don't know where Nyombare is. You know, in Africa, you to stage a coup, the only solution is you commit suicide. The ultimate thing is death.
Let's come back to that in a moment. Dismas, the question is, Burundi, after 10 years of Nkurunziza's leadership, is still the second poorest country in the world.
Yes.
Although I dispute that.
It could be disputed. Belgium said the other day it is pulling back its $3 million to fund the election.
Euros.
3 million euros that they're supposed to spend on the election. Burundi is a country with their budget is $1 billion?
No, $950 million.
Yes, $950
That's a
million.
great improvement. By the way. 5 years ago, it was $150 million.
Yes, close to $1 billion.
Yes.
Dollars,
Yes.
As their budget.
Yes.
You see the people, you see what is going on. If people say, we see Burundi's fragility starting from the period before the Arusha Accords. We went to Arusha because we wanted this country to be peaceful. We wrote a constitution because we wanted this country to be peaceful.
Yes.
And now they're saying, you have served 10 years, go home.
But Charles,
What is it that Nkurunziza
but Charles has
he
the
must
answers. Who are the people?
Yes.
And how many are there?
I'm
Those who are
asking
saying
those who have been protesting. BBC had a very good representation. They said President Pierre Nkurunziza was accompanied by dozens of people on his return to the capital. And they said, immediately after, they said, there have been thousands of people on the streets protesting. So if you use that as a measure...
Don't go into media propaganda.
No, if you use that as a measure...
Did BBC have somebody on the ground?
Yes, it did.
This time around.
Yes.
This time around, it's made Al Jazeera that
it has.
Malcolm
Just a
Wales.
quick one. What is he fighting for?
I think he's, fighting for. I don't think by us saying that Burundi is the poorest country, that it has not gained some improvement in terms of...
It has made a lot of progress.
Changes. The only problem is that other countries have been growing faster. So it can't be able to catch up. The other day someone was giving me statistics. One factory here which makes, what are these, tubes and... the tanks, the water tanks, and uses more electricity than the country of Burundi. The whole country.
I think it's...
it was Mike Mukura on KFM.
But the people connected to the national grid in Burundi are less than 5%.
Yes. So the country has had... It is living in a region where it can improve economically if they put their minds to it. The problem is that, like Chris is saying, for 10 years is time enough, probably as a president of a country, really to have put in something that shows you are moving towards.
But against what background? Against what background?
Exactly.
For how long had Burundi been unstable?
It has been there for a long period of time.
From inception, 1962.
Yes.
Actually, we're even addressing issues
Gentlemen,
colonial.
colonial
Burundi was unstable.
Can you allow
Burundi has never had a truly peaceful transition from one leader to another.
And that's the question.
Even during the days of the kingship.
Why deny Burundi an opportunity to have a peaceful transition?
Can
we discuss that after a short commercial break? Please.
Thank you so much. And it will be addressed by the law.
Welcome back to this last segment of the Fourth Estate, and we're discussing the crisis in Burundi with Chris Obore, Edgar Tavaro, and Dismas Nkunda. And I think for the first time, or one of those few occasions, Chris, since this show began, where we have a crew that all has had a major link with the media. This guy was running UBC at some stage.
Oh, this managing
director. He was managing director of UBC, the national broadcaster. Dismas, you started
as the veteran.
The first journalist for the Daily. So at least we have a truly fourth estate to discuss this crisis in Burundi. Gentlemen, we have very little time to end for this last segment. And the question is, does Burundi, Chris, still have an opportunity at peaceful transition even if Nkurunziza gets these 5 years?
Very good. It takes back to my starting point. You asked a beautiful question. Why deny Burundi opportunity for peaceful transfer? I have told you, start by examining the guiding principles for those who aspire to lead us. In other terms, what is the motivation of many African leaders to aspire to be leaders? Is to build economic empires, is to safeguard their immediate family from economic vagaries. They want to capture those empires. So you find in Burundi, instead of allowing the people power, the people of power is in rhetoric. In actual sense, Africans have no power. Uganda here, people have no power. But we have been trying to say we have institutionalized. Of course, there is the police, there is the judiciary, there is this. But in their functioning, they don't manifest the people power.
The names exist.
It is why a peasant in Uganda can lose their land, and many they are watching me are crying. And the courts of law.
No, but there are mechanisms for redress, Mr. Obore.
Well, very good. I like all of that. Of course, you're a lawyer. Those are all legal terminology.
And you know, the judiciary is...
There is no mechanism on earth that means anything if it does not translate to the well-being
of the people. Thank you so much.
So when we see Burundi second poorest in the world, please, my brother, it is not to underestimate the power of law. I am simply saying, save me the mechanisms. As long as I see the Burundians bare feet, I don't think any mechanism has helped them. So why do we deny them a peaceful transfer? It would mean a shift of economic power from a group, from one club to another club.
A drastic shift if it's
drastic and the...
You see the point? There is a lot to lose. Because the people in the region, the people in Burundi have particular interests that conflict with what we stand for, the idealists. That let us grow as countries. Let's grow as people. The others have decided to grow with their countries via rhetoric. You know, we will do this. The negritude movement is my inspiration. How I studied literature, I felt they brought my Pan-Africanism up.
They awakened you.
They awakened my conscience, African conscience, and I discovered. Therefore, Songor, his wife, French.
He was actually a French citizen, a member of the French Senate.
Exactly.
And he was tasked to develop the French language.
Yes. And the Senegal speaks the best French.
You know, you know the word central in French is sans. It was developed by Leopold Senghor.
You see? Okay. But you see the speeches they're doing in Africa? Everything African. So people, let me put it in short, we have not respected the sanctity of lives of our people.
Okay.
We have decided to use the misfortune of our people to advance ourselves and to create our own
I may not have opportunity to come back to you since we have little time. Will Burundi, can a third term for President Pierre Nkurunziza guarantee a peaceful handover of power, even if he was to get the opportunity to serve another 5 years?
I can assure you, not just Burundi. Africa will change when the concept martyrdom begins to manifest.
Thank you.
Because one, even in Pierre Nkurunziza is beholden to particular interests. He talks about global, regional, and national interests, and then their personal interests. Now, he talked about external interest, because it is about a country against others. In international relations, every country acts for the good of their citizens. The more organized a country is, the better for it to bargain. We have denied Burundi the power to bargain at the international stage for the good of the citizens.
Thank you. Edgar, can Pierre Nkurunziza stand as the guarantor of that bargaining power, especially given the international and external forces against him? Now the division that will emerge, obviously, in the military, because he has picked up the coup plotters and put them in jail. There are others who are operating who are not yet there. Nobody knows where Nyombare is, or who his benefactors are at this stage. Can
the jailed guys are going to have amnesty. He promised them amnesty if they negotiate for it.
If they negotiate for it.
From behind the bars.
Is, what is the chance that Burundi now either descends to pre-2001 situation, or actually runs an election, which is supposed to have been this month, runs an election, and if Nkurunziza is re-elected, that he can guarantee that after 5 years, he'll be in a position to hand that country over to another.
You know, you can't, Mr. Mwangu here, you can't predict the future with exactitude. You can only draw scenarios, construct scenarios, deconstruct scenarios. If this were to happen, this is likely to happen. So for me say that Nkurunziza will be the guarantor and what have you, I don't want to be drawn into that debate. But I'd like to look at it in a broader spectrum. The Great Lakes region of 2015 is not the Great Lakes region of 2001, where you just walk into Congo, impose a leader, walk into Congo, kill people, walk into Congo, sponsor this militia, that militia. It is a changed environment. And, you know, I've dwelled so much on the economics, not out of
love for money.
You are ambushing me, disturbing me. Not because I'm taken up by the love for money as I'm putting it, but
by the deals I'm holding.
But you know, as it
But
were,
the interest of the client, not the lawyer.
Mr. Boy, you go again. But as it were, let me give you a bit of a scenario in Congo. You've heard of the Grand Inga Dam. 39,000 megawatts of electricity capacity potential. And it's an
It can power the whole of Africa.
The power of the whole of Africa. An $80 billion project. Now, South Africa has guaranteed an offtake agreement that the bulk of the power we shall purchase. ESCOM is going to be the major what? Now, if you have guaranteed offtake, then financing mechanisms can be worked out. Who are the contractors? Who are going to be the contractors? Chinese. Now, take it from me. You destabilize such a country, South Africa will be on your case. You get it? And you know how many South African companies, even Zumba-connected companies, are involved in
the Grand Inga project.
In the Grand Inga project.
As they are in a lot of projects across the continent.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm not doing the, I'm really bringing these things to the fore to show you that, to take you to a certain point that I'm trying to build on. I remember, was it in 1992, you had already started practicing journalism, the 30 years of independence. Mr. Museveni gave a speech. And earlier on in 1989, you know, he was guest of honor at the 200th anniversary of the French Revolution, you remember? Oh, very, you know, this African young man in his 40s, talking straight and blunt. And he said the reason as to why Africa lost out and was colonized is because it was socially weak. Then in 1992, at our independence celebration, 30 years, I remember he was castigating the British. He had just addressed, I think, the British. Was it the upper house or the lower chamber?
Can I kindly, can I kindly request that we go back to Burundi?
Yeah, I'm bringing it. No, he said that Africa's biggest problem is political. So now I'd like to combine those two, politics and
economics.
And the social bit.
Social.
We are thoroughly disorganized. And for some reason, everywhere in Africa, we seem to be where Africa was 50 years ago. Why? Me and you have surrendered running of the affairs of the state to...
Can I put the question back?
Yes, please.
Does Nkurunziza organize the social and political life of Burundi in the next 5 years to guarantee that?
If he continues delivering on social, if he continues delivering on economic growth, I mean, they've been registering 4.5, 4.5, 4.7 average. Not really great, but I mean, it's nevertheless commendable. Of course, not as compared to Uganda, where we've registered 6. Inflation is only 4%. Inflation is only 4%. In 2009, FDIs, they attracted only 20 million. 20 million, apart from 20 million, I mean, even OPM, they embezzled much more than $20 million. But you can imagine...
Pocket change for some.
Pocket change for some. I mean, this pension scam.
Yeah. No.
We can finance the entire Burundi from our pension.
No, the money...
Our pension. Thieves. Just 3-4 people can finance the whole of Burundi. But last year they attracted 104 million. US dollars in terms of foreign direct investment. So there's gradual improvement. That's
like above half what we paid to Hassan Basaja.
So you see, unfortunately, the so-called crisis that we have in Burundi now does not augur well for investment. You know, when you're doing political risk.
Can you then make an attempt to answer my question finally? Why is Nkurunziza fighting to be president of that country?
I think the best person to ask would be Mr. Willie Nyamitwe.
No. I'm asking Edgar Tabaro.
You want me to answer on behalf of Mr. Nkurunziza?
Yes.
Well, I'll send him a WhatsApp text tonight, and I'll give you his response tomorrow.
The other question I should ask Charles. See, Charles, if you make it why is Nkurunziza, you will take a one-sided freedom of analysis. You must tell our people that without the actual sense of power belonging to them, there is no guarantee that those who want to remove Nkurunziza will do any better. You see the point?
I'm afraid to get into that argument.
So you can get out Nkurunziza, but you don't have safety net to say those who come can be better than Nkurunziza. That's Africa's dilemma.
I'm afraid to get into that argument. I hear that argument being raised by this is our best striker, this is the best we have, and we have seen Pele emerge and go and
don't ignore that, because if you ignore that, the peasants in Luero listening today will side with me. They were promised heaven on earth.
Exactly.
Now they
and
have
what do they have?
Hell on earth.
Exactly. You're answering your own question.
They have jiggers. So at that time, hold on. At that time, they were telling them, what does Obote have to do? They got Obote out. So why should they complain today? So we must have the safety net that anybody who becomes a leader should be wary of a power of an Edgar Tabaro.
Okay.
A lawyer has his should have a say on that one who holds state power. In Africa, Edgar Tabaro can only have professional power, which doesn't impact on
the social organization I'm talking about. That's the social organization I'm talking about.
You help frame my other question to
Mr. Nkunda.
Mr. Nkunda. Is the destiny of Burundi tied to the individuals? When do we begin as Africa to discuss beyond the individuals? Because this debate, I haven't had, since the crisis in Burundi started, I haven't had the different players emerge and put on the table a different program agenda. I also haven't had CNN, that very long thing.
Council for Defense of National Democracy, Forces for Defense of Democracy.
That mouthful. I haven't even had that party and its leader say, this is what we have done for Burundi, this is what we want to do, this is why we are insisting that we need to serve out our full term.
I think I tend to agree with Chris. One of the things is that the history, like Edgar was saying, giving the history of Burundi. It's interesting, Burundi is the only country right now in this region that has all its former presidents, except the ones who died, alive in the country.
And in the Senate.
And in the Senate. You have Bagaza, you have Buyoya, you have
Ntibantunganya, you have Ndize,
all of them, they're there. Now, the only one out of them who spoke a little bit was Buyoya, because Buyoya is an eminent African person. He's serving on various
UN and the AU.
But the point being, what he says, has there, even if you brought Buyoya to become, if he became Uprona, you said it's the new leader they have elected is called Gerard Nduwayo. He's the new leader of Uprona.
He's actually a presidential candidate.
He's presidential candidate, yes, and is one of the oldest parties in the country. The beauty about it is that even when you have all this happening in Burundi, the ethnic tension hasn't come in. For me, that was the very biggest fear that I had about the ethnic division, is that brought successive genocides.
Thanks to the politics of Mr. Nkurunziza.
No, but Nkurunziza is not the politics.
He could have, he's the leader, he could have played
but Nkurunziza can't, he's a Hutsi.
I know what you mean. But he's very
for the benefit of our viewers, a Hutsi is a mixture. Is a Mchotera of Hutu.
That's like Mchotera. Is a product of a Hutu father and a Hutu mother, and is married to a Hutu.
Yeah, that's what Christian Mchotera.
Yes.
If you didn't know,
you know, Mchotera is derogatory.
I would think
just finish your point there.
I would think that honestly, Burundi had a chance in this time to be able to, like Chris says, to build the institutions for people to demand. Now, everybody else who's going to come to power, they have known the game, how to play in Burundi. They have known the game. So it's going to be the continuous thing of every leader who comes in, they have their own strategy of how do I remain in power for long, of how do I maintain myself in power for long, and it's going to go on.
It's a possibility. It may not work out.
And if it tells you no, Charles here knows very well, and we have repeated on this show, our biggest dilemma is we have you see, for Edgar Tabaro, he will gain respect since a child he went to school, he had aspirations to become a lawyer. He has become a lawyer.
Maybe I was
He has
conscripted.
maybe
it was a type of choice.
You would have failed. He has
Thank
taught
you
law.
so much.
He's practicing law at any level. So if today he says he wants to be a leader, he can even have a reason to talk why he wants to be a leader. He has at least surpassed his basic needs. So he's time to self-actualize.
Actualization.
Now,
in Rutoro, we say he has a karate.
yes,
You know,
African
he has
problem
some
is the political scene.
Actually, sometimes it's derogatory.
No,
In fact, to those who have been close to the palace. And
You live your Toro King. In Africa,
No, there
gentlemen,
should be a discussion about Torah at some point.
About Toro Kingdom. No, not in this forum.
in
Can you
Africa,
finish with Burundi?
the dominance of political entrepreneurs as opposed to professional and business entrepreneurs is a big challenge. People who come to leadership to own their first house, to own their hotels, to own a ranch, can never build institutions and can never empower a citizen. Because empowering a citizen would mean even you must account
Call them
for
to
what
account.
you own.
Thank you.
Now, most of these people, Charles, you know, children own shares before they are born.
What names do they put there?
Whatever. A child of 6 months is a shareholder in
an airline.
In an airline. Mwangusha, who has done his books, who has taught, who has been a journalist.
It's going to own 5 acres of tea.
No, it's so, if you go to the daylight community societies, like the US, America, the Europe, one of the things which is very clear is you are free to become wealthy in Europe. But how you go to wealth must be known.
But even the wealth is taxed.
And then now the wealth you have
Is
must be known. But Africa here, Great Lakes region here, we eat in hotels from our hospitals. We eat in ranches. People are exporting beef to Burundi. And you think they are fighting for the interests of ordinary Burundian? So Charles, reconfiguring our concept of leadership and how we play politics is what will bring stability to Africa.
Thank you.
Not
And
just
that was the major thing, which is a good point to end at, because one of the major discussions with Edgar before we came on air, we're discussing how Nkurunziza was an accidental president.
I did use those words. I
No,
said
accidental president.
he was identified by Mr. Museveni.
He was identified.
This man is a lawyer. Yes, client. Why
and with Mr. Ngunda.
Nkunda. My name is Nkunda, not Ngunda. Ngunda means something different.
We're discussing
Are you Nkunda Batkware?
No. Nkunda, full stop.
how the guy became Minister for Human Rights?
Human Rights and Governance.
Human Rights and Governance. If you found Pierre Nkurunziza 20 years ago, no one would see him in the line of becoming a leader.
He was
in the
a
region.
lecturer at university.
But
Yes,
those are the candidates we need. Who would see Obama to be American president?
Our time is out, gentlemen.
The
Thank you very
allow
much.
that. Actually, I like him.
Thank you
for
very
that.
much.
Mr. Nkurunziza is an accidental guerrilla, is an accidental politician.
But all of them who have become leaders, if you look at where they began from, really they are all villagers until they...
The difference is that some villagers come and become thieves. Others continue being just normal villagers.
The problem always starts when you begin to demand for more. Our time is out. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mwangi.
Thank you very much to you all of you for joining us tonight. Do join us again next Sunday for yet another exciting discussion right here on The Fourth Estate. Have a good